What's up guys, this is Teddy. Welcome to my YouTube channel. This video we're going to be installing the data layer for our running group app. This is also sometimes called installing entity framework. So to install entity framework, it's pretty easy. A lot of setup, but not incredibly complicated. All you want to do is we're going to go into our data folder that we created. If you haven't created this already, just go ahead and create it. Then we want to go down here and we don't want to type in application DB context. You can name it whatever you want to. There's no particular name that you have to name it. Then we want to go into here and actually add entity framework. So first thing we want to do, type in NuGet packages up here at the top. So manage NuGet packages. Let's see. All right, and we want to install entity Microsoft Entity Framework Core. Actually, I'm just gonna go through here real quick and just double check entity framework. Yes, so this is the one that we want. We just want to go ahead and hit install. Also, we want to go in here and we want to type in SQL Server. So we're going to go SQL Server because that is the database that we're going to use. You could do Postgres, you could do even SQLite. There's a entity framework works with any database. So whichever one that you want to use, but for example's sake, we are just going to go ahead and use SQL Server. And I also have a whole entire course on SQL Server as well, if you want to check that out. So let me see here. So first thing is we're going to go into our DB context. I'm going to look at some previous DB contexts that I have. So we go in here, type in DB context, and this is going to inherit from Entity Framework Core DB context. And this is what's going to give us all of our actual functionality for the whole entire app. Okay, then we want to go in here and we have a constructor for our app as well too. And the constructor is going to have DB context options in here, and we're actually going to pass in the DB context. So we're going to say application DB context. Then we're going to pass in options right here. Options. Then we're going to say base. So this next thing is basically what this is saying is that pass this in and then pass this up to this actual class right here that Entity Framework provides for us. Kind of a little tidbit of information that you really don't need to know, but I still like to tell people that anyway. And to be honest with you, you really don't need to know that much about Entity Framework in order to set it up. Like, you don't need to know the underlying how Entity Framework works in order to set it up. In fact, I would just say definitely don't worry about any of that, because it's not going to help you in the long run. So we're going to go here, we're going to go clubs, then we're going to go prop, we're going to go prop DB set address. We're going to go addresses, and it's customary for this to be plural right here, and you're passing in the DB set. So this is what's going to give us the ability. This is actually a very important class. We don't usually mess with this class that much, but this is actually a very important part of our app. This is what's going to allow us to be able to actually pull stuff out of the database whenever we want to and do all types of really cool database stuff. So it may not look that important right now, but it's pretty important. So the next thing that we want to do is we're going to want to actually wire this up to our app. And the way that we do that is we go into our builder services. So we're going to go builder, we're going to go services, we're going to go add DB context, just like that. And then we're going to pass in our application DB context. Pretty sure that was the name of it. Then we're going to go in there just like that. Then we're going to go options. And then we're going to bring this down here to make it look a little bit better. You could have it all in one line, but I wouldn't suggest it because it's going to look like doo-doo. All right, then we're going to go use SQL Server. And we're going to go ahead and control dot and bring that in. Then the builder gives us this fancy little way of doing configurations. So we're going to go get connection string, and we're going to call this default connection. We haven't made the connection string yet. We actually have to make this. So what's going on here is that it's setting up our database, and it's going to a place called application or app settings JSON. And we actually need to add this connection string to our app settings JSON. But before we do that, we need to create a server. Sounds really technical and cool, like, ooh, we're going to create a server, but it's not really that complicated. We're just going to go into SQL Server Management Studio. And I actually have a whole entire course on SQL Server Management Studio. If you want to check that out, I'd like go full-blown deep dive into SQL Server Management Studio. So we're going to, this is actually the database that I created when I was making the app before, but I'm just going to go ahead and delete it really quickly. So what you want to do is you want to go to new database. Remember, this is SQL Server Management Studio if you don't have this, and you can name this whatever you want to, but I'm going to call this run groups because that's kind of like the theme or the name of the app, and we're just going to go ahead and hit create. And there's no special setting that you have to do. You don't really have to do anything complicated. You just create the database. Then we're going to go into here and also pay attention because this is the only way, like this way, for some reason, it's very difficult to find connection strings, but this is like a super secret way that I found on Stack Overflow one day that teaches you how to find connection strings really easy. So what I did there was I typed in SQL Server Object Explorer, then I go down here, then I go to the actual Express instance. You could also create a local DB if you wanted to, but I like to have all of the tooling that SQL Server Management Studio has. There's like a local DB. Oh, please don't do this to me. All right, we're gonna have to close it. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we're gonna go in here. Well, at least Eric covered it. Okay, so before I was rudely interrupted, Visual Studio. Okay. SQL Server Object Explorer. So we're going to go SQL Server Object Explorer. Then we go down. Then we're going to go to databases. Then we're going to go to run groups. And we're going to go to properties. And then it just, if you check right here in the properties, it gives us the SQL Server string. And we don't have to do any type of weird searching the internet. And it just does everything. Shocking. Okay, so let's see. We're going to go app settings JSON. And we're just going to go up into the top here. We're going to do connection strings, and be very particular about the spelling of this because the spelling can really drive you insane. And if you look at it, the database name should come after catalog. That's how you tell it's right. And I just typed that in there, and I'll also have this on my GitHub as well too, just in case you want to copy this, because there's no security risk in actually copying it. So next thing is, let's go ahead and see if we can do our first migration. And I need to get the commands real quick. Okay, so if you are in Visual Studio Code, you could just run this in the command line. You could just run this in the command line, but since we're in Visual Studio, you can actually toggle in between these. They're going to give you full tutorials for both, but just take this, go add migration, go down to the Package Manager console. Make sure it's the Package Manager console right here. Don't paste in anything else, and we're just going to do our initial migration. This gives you this error. I have another package that I probably need to install, which is kind of strange. Okay, so if you get that error, what you want to do, and I'll show you what's that's actually a really common error. If you didn't get that error, great. But when you get that error, this is what you need to do. You need to go to Tools, and Microsoft Entity Framework Core Tools. That's how you get that error to go away. So we go back up here, add migration, initial create. App user requires a primary key to be defined. So I went back and I figured out what the issue was. The issue is that we need a ID for app user. I haven't installed Entity Framework, and once we install Entity Framework, we will be able to actually get rid of this. But for right now, we're going to have to actually need a key in order for this to actually work with Entity Framework. So what I did is I just typed in public string ID and I put the key above it, and that hopefully should give us the ability to actually get Entity Framework up and start running. Until we can get, we will remove it later, but right now we just need it for it to be created. So we've got our migration completed. Thank you, God. Now we need to start working on seeding the database. So in order to seed, what we're going to do is just go to my GitHub, and I will show you what we need. So hold on one second. Okay, I actually have to pull it up. So here is the actual, and by the time that you guys watch this, this will be available. So you can copy this whole entire thing and just put it into the seed.cs folder. And I would take a look at it, but I wouldn't get too wrapped up in actually what's going on. It's just a seed file, and there's no real point in typing all of that out when you could just easily copy it, and it'll work just fine. If you want to check it out, though, if you want to see what's actually going on with the code, probably wouldn't hurt. So I'm just going to go in here, and I'm just going to literally copy and paste all of this. So go in here, copy and paste all of this, and we might be missing some stuff as well too. So application. Okay. So we got club. Gonna bring a club category. And this part, we haven't added identity, so we will come back and add identity later. So let's just go ahead and comment this part out. So we're going to go in here. And comment that out. Then we need to go into the actual program file, and then we're going to add, let me see here, we're going to add some more code. And this is very simple. So under App Builder, I'm just going to copy and paste this in. We're going to add this, and what this is going to allow us to do when we actually start the file, it's going to allow us to run this command in order to seed this data, and we'll only have to run it once in order for it to actually seed the data. So next thing that we need to do is we need to update the database. And when you update the database, it's actually going to create the database. So just to kind of explain a little in depth like what's going on and why we actually do these migrations is when you're doing migrations in a production environment, you're probably going to make changes to the database, and then Entity Framework will detect those changes and make changes to your model. But since we work with code first migrations, we make changes to the models and it automatically makes changes to the database. And we have migrations because you're incrementally, usually whenever you're working with software, you're incrementally making changes to a database. And you don't want to make drastic changes all at one time. You just want to maybe change one part of your database and do a migration, and then change one part of your database and then do a migration. And the reason why we have this two-step thing too is because you go in here and sometimes Entity Framework is so abstracted away, you want to actually have more fine-tuned control about maybe what you could turn this ID into. And these migrations, like say if you wanted to, don't actually do this, but say you wanted to turn this ID into a string, you could do that as opposed to just, having to deal with it and just having to deal with the code that Entity Framework generated for you. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. And next thing we need to do is we're going to update the database. This is very nerve-wracking. Whenever I set anything up in Entity Framework, it's always super nerve-wracking. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to build the database. Please God work. It worked. And we're going to just go into SQL Server Management Studio and check that we indeed have this. So don't know why I touched that. So we have all of our entity models set up. These are all of our database columns, and we are pretty much ready to go. Next thing that we want to do is we're going to seed this data. So let me just go ahead into our seed and make sure that this is correct. So we're going to go into here and we're going to pretty much produce a running club for each one. So we have a list of races, we have a list of clubs, and it's going to populate each club. So we're going to go into our I don't know what that is. Actually, let me just check something real quick. I'm gonna exit out Discord. Okay. All right, so we're gonna go .NET run seed data, and hopefully this works. Okay, cd group web app. Okay. .NET run seed. Just like that. And hopefully that will work. And it I think it worked. I think it seeded our database correctly. And we're going to go into here. We're going to go tables. We're going to check the first table. Let's see. Thank you, God. We don't have any app users yet because we don't have identity. We're just going to work on our running clubs and our races for now. And we have all of our data seeded. Imagine that. I am so glad that that worked out. And I'm so glad that you guys watched this video with me. If you guys enjoyed this video, make sure to hit that like button. Make sure to hit that subscribe button. And as always, thank you for watching.